Welcome back to FPL everyone. In today's video, I'm going to be checking out some of the biggest new signings in the Premier League this season and figuring out whether or not they're going to make good FPL assets come game week 1. Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey, and it has been a long summer, but we're finally back talking about FPL again. If that's not worth a like, and especially hit that subscribe button for more FPL content, then I don't really know what is. First up, let's talk about Florian Wirtz, obviously one of the marquee signings of the summer so far in the Premier League. We will be talking about 7 or 8 of them today, by the way, not all of them. There's loads of other big signings that I won't be able to talk about and also that will come out in the next few weeks. So if I've missed any, just drop a comment below and we'll go through them in another separate video if there's enough interest. So do let me know. Starting off with Wirtz. I am predicting prices at the moment. This is prior to the game launching. We might get some prices later this week, but I think sensibly, we're looking at maybe around 9 to 10 million for Florian Wirtz. Now, obviously no guarantees there, but he will be a player without penalties, probably lining up as a midfielder in FPL, and it would be bold for them to put him in at anything north of 10 million, because that puts him straight in at a premium price point alongside the likes of Saka, Palmer, not quite at the levels of Salah or Haaland, I'm sure, but Isak as well. And especially considering he won't have penalties in this Liverpool side, I think it would be a little bit far to be going in at 10 million plus. However, the data suggests he is going to be a very good FPL pick at some point this season. 0.36 XG per 90. Combine that with the XA per 90 of 0.27 and you have yourself an elite asset, especially in terms of a midfielder. So as long as he comes in the game as a midfielder, no suggestion he shouldn't, then he could be absolutely elite. 22 attacking returns last season. The only thing I will mention here as a caveat is that he took 4 penalties for Leverkusen last season, scoring 2 of them. So he won't get penalties this season. That takes about 2, maybe even 2.8 XG off of his season-long total. So that XG per 90 should come down a little bit. He'll probably get a couple less goals than he might have gotten in the data via the Bundesliga last year. But still very, very healthy. Around about 20 attacking returns is what I'd maybe expect from him, given he starts week in, week out. And the next question will be whether or not we want to pick him in our game week 1 side. I would say probably with most of these signings, that it's always worth being a little bit more cautious. He comes from the Bundesliga. Obviously, he's a fantastic world-class player, but we've seen players struggle to integrate before. And considering he won't come in cheap, it's still going to be a lot of money for a game week 1 side when our budgets are very, very tight at just 100 million. Is he going to be worth the risk of spending almost 1/10 of your budget on one player who's never played in the league before, especially looking at that opening 4 set of fixtures? Bournemouth at home, they've lost some players, especially defensively, but they're not an easy team to break down, I'm sure. Newcastle and then Arsenal in game weeks 2 and 3, it's not ideal. Burnley in game week 4, maybe that's the right time to start looking at hopping on extra Liverpool assets. Salah will be very popular. Do you want to double up in the midfield with Wirtz? I'm not sure that it's worth doing to begin with, but given the data and given the kind of position we think he'll be playing, that will be either as a false 9, maybe on the left-hand side, inverting from the left wing, possibly a more withdrawn role in an 8, like a Szoboszlai or a McAllister, but I think it's more likely he plays even more advanced than he did at Leverkusen. So I think there's a real asset here. At 9.5 million, it could be great value, but given that he's not going to be on penalties and he's going to have to integrate, I would maybe just urge a little bit of caution to begin with, given the expected price point. If he's a bit more affordable than this, then he might become a little bit more tempting for me come game week 1. So let's deal with the other 2 Liverpool major purchases so far. That is on both sides of the defence. Kerkez will come in as a left back, and then you've got Frimpong, if I just move over the graphic here, who should come in as a right back. I've put in expected prices of 6 million for Frimpong and 5.5 million for Kerkez. And I think that'll be about right and probably fair as well. I would imagine Van Dijk comes in at 6 to 6.5. He usually does, but he is absolutely locked in, 90-minute man week in, week out, and has a bit of goal threat. These 2 players are brand new signings for Liverpool. They'll need to integrate. And crucially, although they're very talented, they're not playing those positions by themselves. On the right-hand side, competing with Frimpong is Connor Bradley, who's been there for a couple of seasons, will be fighting for that position. And although I expect Frimpong to be the starter, given that data and the fact that he's come in with a considerable amount of pedigree from the Bundesliga as well, Connor Bradley will be fighting for minutes, and it wouldn't be shocking to me if I saw Bradley starting the first couple of games whilst Frimpong was integrating, or maybe Frimpong starts 4 out of the first 5, Connor Bradley gets some substitute appearances and steals some minutes off of him. And we do want players locked in and absolutely certain to start for the first few game weeks. We don't want to be taking too many risks. Maybe 1 or 2 is okay. But also, if they're getting taken off early week in, week out, that's not ideal either. The data's really good for Frimpong, much better than Kerkez. So 0.16 XG per 90 suggests that he's far more than just a classic right back. He actually gets into advanced positions. He bombs up the right wing consistently. Will he get in Salah's way? I doubt it. I think they're going to work together really nicely, but the relationship will be undoubtedly very different to that of Trent with Salah. Trent remained a little bit further back and played that quarterback role, pinging the balls into the box. Frimpong does get a little bit more involved aggressively in the final third and dribbles with the ball a lot more as well. So it's a different style of right back. I expect 6 million to be around about where he comes in. If we're really lucky, maybe 5.5. And if that's the case, he'll be very tempting come game week 1, despite the fixtures. But again, given that the minutes might be a little bit shared with Bradley to begin with, at 6 million, you really want someone who's absolutely locked in. On the left-hand side, if Kerkez comes in at 5.5, which again, I think is probably about right, not quite as much attacking potential or pedigree, I suppose, as Frimpong, 0.02 XG per 90 at Bournemouth last season. But given that Robertson is still hanging around, but he's definitely not as much of a threat to the minutes moving forwards as maybe Connor Bradley would be for Frimpong, given the age profiles, Kerkez long-term could be a very secure left-back for Liverpool. And given the signings that they're making, it seems that the left-back position is going to be Kerkez's long-term. Now, he does have competition. Obviously, Robertson isn't going anywhere just yet, unless we maybe get some sort of move in the transfer window over the next few weeks. So minutes will be maybe shared to begin with, but you'd expect at some point this season, he is the nailed-on left back, and at 5.5 million, if he comes in at that price, which I think he probably will, given there is a risk to minutes to begin with, and the data is not quite as good as Frimpong's, I think that's going to be a real steal at some point towards the middle of the season, perhaps. Maybe if we're lucky, he's a bit more locked in to begin with, but I think, again, the minutes risk is there, so I might be holding off on it, especially with those first 3 fixtures. If he's locked in and he's getting 90 minutes for the first 3 or 4, then he will be an easy jump across from maybe another premium defender. If he comes in at 6 million, I think that's a bit much. I think it'll be 5.5 million. If he comes in cheaper than that, then I think we've got ourselves a potential bargain because he's got attacking pedigree. We saw that at Bournemouth. And when you add in some extra clean sheets, which we historically know Liverpool can keep ahead of a team like Bournemouth, then he could be a really good pickup at some point. So next up, we've got the story of 2 Ryans, both signed for Man City. We've got Rayan Ait-Nouri, and then we'll talk about Ryan Cherki in just a moment's time. First up, Ait-Nouri, because we're a little bit more familiar with him and his work at Wolves. And ironically, Man City go up away to Molineux, to Wolves in game week 1. So will Ait-Nouri be a starter come game week 1? Well, the signs are promising, and more often than not, I'm hesitant when it comes to Man City new signings with integrating them. We have seen it in the past where they do come straight in and play, but more often than not, that's not been the case and they take a little while to integrate properly. Haaland, Marmoush have been exceptions to the rule, but the rule tends to be there for a reason, that these players do take a little while to embed. However, we've been given a little bit of an olive branch over the pre-season with the Club World Cup. Ait-Nouri being signed so early meant that he could travel to the Club World Cup, and we did see him in action in a Man City shirt. And he's been getting decent minutes as well. At left back, he's been getting forward, getting into advanced positions, exactly like we saw at Wolves. So I think the intention is to have him as the left back for Man City this season, the starting left back in their preferred first 11. Again, though, as we always say with Pep, there's always a chance that he reverts to type come game week 1, and it takes a little while to integrate these players into a new system. They'll undoubtedly want to change one or two things, tweak a few aspects to their formation, to their system, after what was a disappointing campaign last year. Ait-Nouri, I think, has been signed as a bit of a solution to that. They were playing Gvardiol at left back for a lot of last season, and that's not the reason they signed Gvardiol in the first place. They wanted him to play left centre back, I believe, and he was kind of used out there because he was capable at getting into those advanced positions, and at times he was a bit of a cheat code for Man City, even as a non-natural left back in those positions. Ait-Nouri is a natural in those exact positions where Gvardiol was taking up in the advanced areas, in the final third at times last year, as a bit of a box crasher to create a bit of chaos in the final third. That extra spare man really goes a long way when you're playing a possession-based game where you're trying to break down a low block. And Ait-Nouri is fantastic at that aspect, getting into the box late, providing that extra man. And I think once we see him regularly starting, if he comes in at 5.5 million, I think that is going to be one of the bargains of the season. I would not be surprised at all if he comes in at just a shade more at about 6 million. But given that he was usually 4.5-ish at Wolves, and the fact that we don't know for certain that he's going to be a starter from the off, I wouldn't be shocked to see him come in at a little bit of a more carrot dangling price, let's say, at 5.5 million, just to tempt a few managers to begin with. The fixtures aren't bad either for Man City. They're not anywhere near as bad as the likes of Arsenal's or Man United's for the first few. No greens there, but a pretty decent set. And Ait-Nouri does have the Premier League pedigree, so I'm a little bit more confident on him than I would be on some of the other Man City signings that might just need a little bit of time to embed. So Ait-Nouri for me could be easily in my side come game week 1. The one doubt there would be Pep maybe reverting to type for a week or two before properly embedding him in the side. So the other Rayan is Cherki. Now, please do let me know if you're a native French speaker, whether or not I'm getting that exactly right. I want to nail the pronunciation. But the data looks really promising for him as well. I reckon, and this is a bit of a guess, I don't have anything to suggest that he's going to come in at 7.5, but I reckon that'll be about fair. Maybe if we're lucky, a shade cheaper. But given the data that we can see from FB Ref here, 0.49 XA per 90, it seems like he's coming in as a bit of a replacement for Kevin De Bruyne. He's that artist in the middle that creates something out of nothing. He knows how to unpick a lock. And that data, that profile of data, is much more swayed towards expected assists than it is expected goals, which again seems very familiar to the likes of KDB. Is he the same player as KDB? Absolutely not. He's obviously got different strengths, different weaknesses, and Pep won't be looking to use him in exactly the same way. But the similar profile suggests to me that he is coming in as the creative replacement in the engine room for Man City to unpick those locks wherever possible. I don't think that he'll be as secure as a starter as we want him to be for him to be a nailed-on FPL asset. Maybe later on in the season, he gets a little run of games, and even players like Foden, Bernardo Silva, we've even had it with Gundogan, with KDB himself as well at times. They've been good assets in isolation, in little pockets of time, but over a stretch of a season, you can't really trust them for 90 minutes week in, week out. I think, sadly, that will be the case with Cherki. But if he gets a little run and gets off to a good start, then maybe he nails down his position. The data is great. So I think eventually he will be an option at some point. But given that I don't expect him to come in anywhere under 7 million because of the data, I think that he might be one that I'm going to avoid to begin with, because I think the risk is there that, again, they've just got so many talented midfielders to pick from that have been embedded in the squad for years and years and years now. Are they going to throw Cherki in 90 minutes every single week? I don't think so. Will he get minutes? Absolutely. But I don't think at that price, getting a few minutes here and there, or maybe 60, 70, and maybe benched in the second or third game in a row, I don't think that's quite enough, considering some of the alternatives at that price point will likely be on penalties, set pieces, and getting 90 minutes for, albeit inferior sides, but still the data is there for them as well. So I think for me, he's one that I'm probably going to leave to one side to begin with, keep a very close eye on, because if he does get the minutes, then that data is fantastic. But for me, for now, I'm probably going to leave him. Moving over to the other half of Manchester, Man United are Well, I was about to say making moves this window, but they made one early one. They're still trying to get another one done in the shape of Bryan and Mbeumo. Now, with Man United, it kind of makes things a little bit easy for me because both Cunha and Mbeumo were Premier League players last year, and not just any Premier League players, they were absolutely sensational FPL assets as well. So we've got plenty of data on them, we've got memories of them, we know what they're like as FPL assets. So I'm not going to talk to you about the pros and cons of them as players quite so much as with some of the other new signings, because we already know what they're all about. We know that they've got good underlying attacking data. We know they can score goals, but also crucially, just as a reminder, we know that they massively overperformed their underlying data last season. Now, that is not being said to put you off of them as FPL options, but I do want to maybe just urge a little bit of caution when picking either Cunha or, I know he hasn't been signed yet, but Bryan and Mbeumo looks very likely. Both of them are likely to come in to Man United with price tags reflecting their performance last season in FPL. And because their performance was so good, I expect them to come in at no cheaper than 8 million in either player's case. I reckon Mbeumo will come in maybe a little bit more expensive at something like 8.5. A few friends have been saying, oh, he's got to come in at 9.5, given that he was the second highest point scorer last season. But I think a little bit of logic will be applied here. He did overperform. He was on penalties and he was talismanic. He's very unlikely, or at least pretty unlikely, to get penalties for Man United if he signs for them, of course. And he probably won't be on as many set pieces either. And given the overperformance, I think 8.5 would probably be about fair. With Cunha, I reckon 8's probably about fair. He didn't quite match Mbeumo in terms of the underlying data. He did take penalties for Wolves as well, which we don't massively expect him to get for Man United. So I think he needs an increase in price, but I don't think he'll go up to the level of a Bruno Fernandes. If Bruno comes in at 8.5, matching Mbeumo, I think that'd be about fair. Cunha maybe a shade cheaper than either of them. Whichever of those three takes penalties, I think deserves to be the priority because all of them have actually pretty similar data. I expect all three of them to get very good minutes. They've all been consistently 80 to 90 minute men for seasons now. Cunha has some disciplinary problems, but when he's not getting red carded, he is usually a lock in the side. And I expect all three of them to do well from FPL point of view throughout the season. I think Cunha would be tempting at 8 million, but given that he's probably not going to be on penalties, and given the start of the season that Man United have got with Arsenal and Man City in the opening four, I'll probably give him a watching brief for now. And if Mbeumo signs as well, given that he's 8.5, I'm not massively confident that that's going to provide good value for money if he's off of penalties and off of set pieces. But maybe let's wait and see. Maybe he takes set pieces, maybe he gets a couple of penalties in pre-season, and it makes us a little bit more bullish on his prospects as a talisman once again in a Man United shirt. Now, it's worth noting that he hasn't signed for Man United at time of recording. It looks likely that it's going to happen. But if he doesn't sign for Man United, he'll be on penalties again for Brentford. He'll be talismanic once again. He'll get set pieces. And even at 8.5 million, he might still be very tempting for Brentford. But we're basing this on the I would say high likelihood that he plays for Man United this season. 8.5 I think is fair. The data is very good. It is with both of them. But given that this includes penalty data, I'd maybe just bring that down a notch and maybe taper our expectations ever so slightly. I think both of these players makes Bruno possibly an even better FPL asset, by the way. So watch out for that. And let me know in the comments below which of those three you think is going to take penalties, and maybe a bold prediction. Which of those three do you reckon is going to score the most FPL points this season? So a final one that I'm going to talk about today is Liam Delap. And there is a lot of excitement about this player in FPL this season. He did really well with Ipswich, considering that they were a weaker team in the Premier League last season. His first proper season playing in the Premier League, getting 12 goals for a struggling side, especially with that data, 0.32 XG per 90, is not bad at all. He's got a pretty good profile for a striker in the Premier League as well. He fills out his shirt pretty nicely. He's a big guy. He's also not slow. He holds up the ball well, and he's got a very good eye for goal. So there's a lot going for this guy. And I reckon he actually comes in fairly cheap at something around 6.5 million. I think the reason he comes in at around 6.5 is because he's got competition for that starting spot. Jackson, there's been some rumours about him moving on, but coming out today, it sounds likely that he's going to fight for his place in that number 9 role for Chelsea up front. Obviously, Delap's taken the number 9 shirt, so maybe that's a little bit of a signal as to who Chelsea are prioritising up front, or maybe it doesn't really mean much at all. And he's still going to have to compete with the likes of Jackson, but also Joao Pedro, who's also just signed. I'm not including him in this video, so do watch out for a second video on this, and let me know if you think it's worth even talking about him as well. Delap, though, just focusing in on him for a minute, he won't get penalties for Chelsea. I think that's going to be solidly Cole Palmer's duty. So that might just take one extra benefit away from him. However, does he need penalties at 6.5 million? I would say if he gets locked in as a Chelsea forward, 6.5 million for someone who's probably going to get better data than this in a Champions League level side, is really good value for money. But the key question here is he going to start every single week? Well, to begin with, we're going to have him starting most likely because Jackson is suspended. So we've got a little leg up there. And then it's whether or not he can hold on to that starting place throughout the season. And I think if I'm honest with myself, if Jackson's there, I don't think I'm going to be going for Delap to begin with, unless I was doing something like a bench boost game week 1 and wildcarding soon after, because I think the risk is just too great, considering Jackson's not a bad player. He will get minutes at certain times. Pedro could also get minutes in the centre forward role. I like Delap. I think he's a great forward and I think he's got a great future ahead of him. I wouldn't be surprised to see him get the England shirt after Kane retires from international duty. However, I think it's still early in his career and he'll probably get embedded in fairly slowly, barring that game week 1, of course, where it's likely he'll start because Jackson is out. For me, though, he could be interesting at 6.5 million at certain points, but unless I see more of a guarantee of minutes, he's one that I'll probably avoid. As we reach the end of today's video, let me know any other players that I haven't talked about, and there are plenty, of course, in the comments below, which other players you're most interested in, and I'll make a video on those as well. And of these new signings, which ones are likely, if any, to be in your Game Week 1 side? Before you go, please remember to hit like and click subscribe. It'd be massively helpful to me, and I'll see you next time.